Thanks so much for taking the time to be here. We're going to get started. I know a lot of you, but I don't know some of you. Like I said, I think we have over 30 people registered for this class. Not everybody's going to be able to attend live, which is fine. We're going to be able to send the recording out later. The reason I wanted to have this class was because I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. A lot around finances as well. So my husband and I did a YOLO after COVID, and we literally just wanted to escape life. We were pretty burnt out. So we sold our house, everything in it, our cars that were paid off, everything. We took four suitcases, two totes, and two dogs to Panama. And that was everything we owned. And we lived there for almost a year. We had some things that didn't go right for us, which is kind of par for the course, but no longer. I'm just saying no more. And anyway, so we came back home and we really had to start over with everything. We had to rent. We had to find a place to rent because we had sold our home. We had to save up some cash to buy some cars because I don't like car payments. We had no car. We were borrowing a car for my husband to get to and from work. And we had $300 in our bank account, and my husband was 2 weeks away from starting his new job. And we literally had to start from scratch. So after I wallowed for a bit, I decided, okay, I'm going to do real estate again. And I attended Sheldon's class that he was teaching for realtors at the time. I was really impressed with the information. I learned stuff that I had never known, even though I have a college degree. And started implementing some of those things. I'm not there yet, but we have been able to do a lot in the last 3 years. So I just wanted to share what I had learned, and hopefully you guys can have some takeaways today. So Sheldon, go ahead and introduce yourself and let's get started.
Well, thank you, Christina. And thank you, everybody else, for joining us today and everybody else who's watching this later. My name is Sheldon Bain. I'm a managing director for this company called Future Capital Management. I've been in the industry a little over a decade. And Christina, much like you, when I started down this journey and started to get into this field, I also had made some terrible financial decisions that by no fault of anybody's but my own. But I did learn along the way that they just don't teach us these things. You can tinfoil hat it if you want to as to why they don't, but nonetheless, we don't get taught a lot of these things that we should in school on really how to make life easier and how to do the right things in the right manner in the right ways. So when I started in this career, I thought to myself, you know what, we have to figure out how to teach this information without selling anybody anything, without making it uncomfortable for anybody. It's valuable information that everybody needs to know. And so we started on that journey about a decade ago, and we teach hundreds of these classes every year all across the nation on Zoom, in person, all these different things, just trying to give people a little bit of a leg up for things that they should have been taught, but we weren't. So I appreciate you having me on here. And guys, today is just simply an educational webinar for us. We're going to cover a lot of topics here. We might have some questions afterwards, and that's great. We encourage all of that. If you can hold on to that until we're done, because this is being recorded, throw it in the chat. Christina will field those as we go through, and then we'll kind of Q&A for as long as you guys need to. All right. So one of the things that we've discovered in our firm here is the biggest problem. People think that the biggest problem is money, and it's not money. There is plenty of money floating around this country all day, every day. If you've got enough ambition and drive, you can make whatever you want to. The problem is the education surrounding it. If you think about it, we go to school for 12 to 16 years, depending on vocation, what we're trying to do. And they teach us things like reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? I was terrible at math. And as a financial professional, that's a little awkward to admit, but I was terrible at math. I couldn't do it. I got D's the whole way through, and I think they just passed me to get rid of me. And my teacher would always say, Sheldon, you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket all day, every day. Later in life, you have to learn this. Well, shame on her, because I do. We all have calculators now, right? So we don't need that. But they didn't teach us things that I found to be a little bit more important as I'm getting older, like how to raise our kids, how to stay married, and how to handle our finances. Those really important day-to-day things, not algebra 2, right? So as we got into this, we realized there's a big problem, and it's a lack of education when it comes to our finances. Okay, so today, again, it's all about education here. We're just going to talk about a lot of things and hopefully give you some little tidbits, some little somethings to kind of take with you and move forward and say, hey, I can correct a little bit of this. I can turn the ship around. We can move forward in a positive way with our finances and help to get things rolling in the right direction again. So the two questions that we typically get from our clients is the first one is, how do I start saving money? It'd be shocking maybe to some of you, but most people don't actually start saving for their retirement, for things like that, until they're 53. That is the average age that people start saving for retirement. So if you're under 53, congratulations, you have a leg up today because you get to start today. If you're over 53, that's okay. It's not too late. We can still help you achieve your goals and get to where you want to go. But that's the biggest number one question is, how do I even start saving money? And I think the reason that people don't is we are inundated with all of these different places and platforms and apps and companies and all these different things. And they're saying this and do that. It's an information overload, and eventually we just don't do it. On top of that, things have gotten a little bit more expensive, if everybody's noticed that in the last 5 years or so. Um, Inflation has kicked in, interest rates have gone a little bit crazy, all this stuff. Things have gotten a lot more expensive, but we're not really making any more than we were back then. So there becomes this stronghold in this issue, and that's typically why people they're just not saving the way that they should. The second question we get is, okay, maybe I have saved for the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years in the bank or my 401k plan or the stock market of some sort. I have saved a little bit, but I also want to figure out how to protect that when I get into retirement. There was a really scary statistic that came out in 2020, and it was 70%, 70% of people who retired in 2020 are going to live the last 5 years of their lives in poverty. When I read that, that shocked me and it made me very angry and it upset me, all of these things, because I thought to myself, boy, if those people just knew a little bit more on how to protect their money that they've saved their whole lives for and how to move forward with it in retirement to not lose it, that statistic would be drastically different. Unfortunately, it's not. So it's kind of our goal to go around and just teach these habits and these principles that we can use to move forward and go with. And these are typically the two questions that we get the most. So these are the two questions that we're going to hit on today. Okay, so the first one is, how do I start saving? What do I do? Well, yes, we can just start taking some money and putting it in the bank, and hopefully that helps. But we're going to talk about something here in a minute called compound interest, which is vastly important for every dollar that we earn. We have to earn it somewhere and do something with it. When I first got into this industry, my mentor, we sat down and we were talking, and he said, so what is your idea of saving? What do you know about it? I said, I don't know. My parents went to the bank. My grandparents went to the bank. I just have some, a couple grand in the bank. And he stopped me right there and he said, well, that's great, but that's not going to get you to where you want to go. And he said, so here's the very simple trick to getting to where you want to go. He said, if you can save $5 a day, and he asked me, can you save $5 a day? I said, yeah, I probably could. And if I went around to each one of you, I bet you'd say, yes, we can save $5 a day. So if we did $5 a day for 40 years at a reasonable interest rate, okay, 8% is a fairly reasonable interest rate. We're not speculating here, but you give the market enough time and 8% is not bad. You'll have about $500,000. Okay, not too bad. Well, when he showed me this, I was a little under 30 at the time, and I stopped him and I said, hey, Mike, a couple of problems here. First problem is 40 years seems like a very long time to only save a $500,000. That doesn't seem like a great plan. Especially in 40 years from now, I can guarantee everybody that the dollar is going to be worth about half of what it is today. So you maybe say that's about $250,000. I'm not sure that's enough to get through retirement. And I said an 8% seems a little odd. I don't know where we're getting this. Now, when I started, the market wasn't doing incredibly great, but it was coming back. And I did learn that there are things out there, there are vehicles we can put money into that guarantee 6, 7, and 8% guaranteed interest, right? I just didn't know about them. And then the last problem I had is I did something weird. I took that $5 a day, and at the time, before I actually started this job, I was working a normal 9 to 5, and I took that and I multiplied it by 30. The reason I did that, which maybe some of you did, is you get paid on a monthly basis. Most of us do. If we've got the normal, typical job, no problem with that. But I multiplied that by 30. I said, Mike, I don't have $150 a month. I just don't. And he stopped me and he said, well, it's interesting because I just asked you if you could save $5 a day and you said you could. And I think everybody here thought to themselves, yeah, Starbucks a day, no big deal. I can save that. But then my emotions kicked in and I thought, that's a bigger chunk than what I think I can do. Um, that's when I learned the first principle around money is what really separates us truly from the wealthy is the wealthy treats money mathematically and logically, and that's it. The rest of us, we treat money emotionally. And that's all that happened to me at that moment as I thought about the 150 and the emotions of leaving that and not having the security and all these things. And I just couldn't do it. And so we sat there for a minute and we kind of discussed this. And I said, okay, that's great. I get it. 150 a month, 40 years, 8%, great. You'll get me there. But no matter what happens, math, logic, all these things, I still don't have $150 extra a month to start putting into something. It was at that point that we said, okay, well, I'm still out of money. I still can't do anything, which is why most of us don't save, is we're living paycheck to paycheck or very close to it. And so what had happened was he introduced me to something that we now do for all of our clients. And it's just called the funnel program. And recently, I don't know if anybody here, I know that Kristina is because she's in real estate, is following interest rates right now. This is the first time in a long time that I heard a lender this morning at a different networking group that I was at start and say, hey, we're refinancing. And his language started with a five, which was great. Right. I think he was at 5.7% or something like that today, which is great. So interest rates are coming down. So he's talking about refinancing. Last couple of years, we've been up in the sevens and eights, and people are now starting to refinance because now we're back down into the fives, which is awesome. And why do we do that? We refinance our mortgage because if we lower the interest rate, we lower the payment, which then puts some more money in our pocket, which gives us the ability to do other things. So when Mike showed me this, he said, so when's the last time you refinanced your finances? I said, I don't know what you mean by that. What are you talking about? And he took me through this entire list and he said, all right, well, let's look at our debts. Let's look at our savings. Let's look at our mortgage. Let's look at our spending habits, our insurances, our tax returns, our student loans. Every piece of financial, anything that we have in our household, most people don't realize that you can look at it and potentially refinance it. If you've got some kind of financial product that you've been using for the last 2 years, 5 years, 15, 20 years, it doesn't matter. The finance industry is kind of like fashion. It's never done. It's always evolving. And like most people, I'll just give you an example. My car insurance, for instance, I had the same company for 12 years, never looked at it, didn't seem to care. And when we looked through everything, we realized that just my car insurance alone, from when I started it to what I was paying now, went up about $104 a month. But it wasn't all at once. If it was all at once, trust me, I would have noticed that. But it wasn't. It was these little $2 here and $3 here and maybe a $10 this year and whatever. And it slowly just crept up over time, but I didn't notice. It just kept coming out. And so we refinanced everything. We went through every financial thing that we had. I just got married at that time. So my wife and I were sitting there, went through everything, and we ended up finding about $300 a month in money that we were already spending. It was just being misallocated because we didn't understand that we could do this. So we went through and we, like I said, about $300 a month. When we do this for clients, we usually come up with somewhere between $300 and $400 a month and just saying, hey, you're already paying for this, but there's a better something out there for you that's maybe half as much. Let's refinance that. Let's get something else in place, turn the dial a little bit. That way we're not having to come up with any more money that we're maybe not making, but we can find money that's just being misspent somewhere and put it to better use elsewhere. So that's exactly what we did. So we did that. Like I said, we found $300, we might find 500, whatever. It's just money that we didn't know that we had, but we were already spending it anyways. There's a great app out there. It's called Rocket Money. I would encourage all of you to use it. You can do the free version. If not, it's like $10 a month. I'm sure you've seen the commercials for it. I've been using it for years, but I plugged in all of my stuff and it said, hey, you have 27 subscriptions that you're paying for. I thought I had like five, right? And that saved me almost $200 a month in just these little, $4.99 here and $3.99 here and things that you just really don't notice and see unless you're keeping an accurate account of your books every month. So we did all of that. And I said, okay, what do we do with this now? Okay, we've got this extra money. And in my thought, I said, hey, I learned just go to the bank and just put that kind of money in the bank. And a couple of reasons why I thought that. One, that's sort of what my parents did. And so I just followed them. If we don't get taught this stuff, typically we just fall back on what we've learned our entire lives, maybe through osmosis and just watching what our family's done. The second thing I thought was this is not enough money to go sit down with a financial professional and have them help me do something with it. No offense to these companies, they're great companies, but if you walk into Charles Schwab or Merrill Lynch or something and you don't have $500,000, nobody's going to give you the time of day. And that's okay for those companies, but there's not really a place for the 280 plus million Americans who maybe don't have that, but need to get started somewhere. And so then we're left to our own devices, and typically it doesn't go well. So what I was taught that day was it doesn't matter really where you go as long as you understand this principle and this key concept right here called compound interest. So if I asked every single one of you if you know what compound interest is, I bet all of you would say, yep, I've heard of it. But then if I ask one more question and says, great, give me a definition, I bet none of us could do that. And if you go into work tomorrow and you ask people this, ask 10 people, maybe 9 of them would give you that same blank stare. I mean, you might have one person that can tell you exactly how this works. So compound interest, Albert Einstein, pretty smart guy, said compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. That those who understand it earn it, and those who don't pay it. So we'll talk about that in a second. But to illustrate this, the reason they probably didn't teach us this in high school is because the mathematical equation for this is so complicated that nobody would understand it. Okay, so if you're taking notes, write this down. So to figure out compound interest, this is called the rule of 72. Okay, you ready for the equation? Here it goes. You take your interest rate, divide it by the number 72, and that tells you how many years it takes your money to double. Can you guys all see why they didn't teach us this incredibly complex scenario in high school? Right? I don't know why they didn't. I don't know why this wasn't a main course for us to figure out. But essentially, what it's doing is you say, okay, if I go to the bank like I wanted to, and I put my money in there and I'm earning 1%, we'll say, which is a pretty reasonable interest rate at the bank. One goes into 72 times. So it will take that $1 I put in there, 72 years, it will double all by itself to $2. And over a decade in the industry, I will give you some free advice. We highly recommend you stay away from 1% vehicles because it's really not going to get you to where you want to go no matter how much money you put into there. So we take this principle and we can use this two different ways. We can either use this on how we're going to calculate, and somebody says, hey, we've got 6%, 7%, we're averaging 5%. In your head or on a calculator, you can calculate this quick and say, great, if I'm in an 8% vehicle, it's going to take me, we'll just use 7 because it's easy. So if we're in a 7.2% vehicle, right? We'll just round up a little bit. It'll take me 10 years. Every 10 years, that money will double on itself. So if I'm averaging about 7%, every 10 years, I should double my money. We can also do it the opposite side. So if I'm going to take out a car loan or a mortgage or interest on a credit card, something like that, you can still do the same and figure out how much extra money you're going to end up paying over that lifetime. If I had learned this when I was 18, I would be in a very different financial situation today than I am. Even learning this a decade ago has helped immensely, but there was 15 years there of mistakes that I got to make in all this money that I ended up paying in interest that I didn't have to because I didn't understand, just like old Al said. So we're going to give a brief example of how this works. So we're going to take a little example here. We've got some triplets. They're 29 years old and grandpa passes away. Okay, grandpa is going to put $5,000 in his trust for each one of them. And with that is a little bit of stipulation. So he said, look, each one of you has to put this in one place. You can't contribute to it. You can't take it away. You can't move it. And the one at 65 that has the most at the end wins. So the first 29-year-old, they go to the bank. The first triplet goes to the bank. That's what mom and dad did. They don't know any different. They also don't think that that's enough to sit down with a professional to do anything with. So they go to the bank and they're earning 4%. Okay, you might be saying, Sheldon, where in the world do we get 4% at a bank? Last couple of years, it's been that way for various different reasons. It is starting to come down now as interest rates come down, but we'll just say he's getting 4%. So 4 goes into 72 18 times. So every 18 years, his money is going to double. So at 47, it's 10,000. At 65, we hit 20,000. So not too bad for not doing anything other than just putting somewhere and letting money work for them. The second triplet, they learn that they can very realistically achieve around 8% on average out there. And so they do that, and 8 goes into 72 every 9 years. When I first saw this, my mentor, he said, all right, Sheldon, you're a pretty smart guy, or at least you think you are. So if we double the interest rate, what is this number going to be at 65? And I said, Mike, it's been a little while since I've been out of school, but not that long. You double the interest rate, you're going to double the return. It's going to be $40,000. And I was way off. I had no idea how compound interest worked, but that's my understanding of the world and how that was. So let's kind of go through this. So at 47, they've already matched their first sibling, but they get to do this 2 more times. So 56, they're at 40, where I thought. They get to do it 1 more time. So 65, they're at 80,000. Okay. Big or little difference between 20 and 80. I think it's a massive difference, especially if you put another 0 on the end of that. difference between 200,000 or 800,000 of retirement time is a lifestyle change. It's very different. But I want us to understand that we didn't go from 4 to 25 to 40. We're not chasing these outrageous interest rates. We're just adjusting the dial. Small amount of interest over a long enough period of time can have a massive effect on what we're trying to do with our money. So last triplet, they go and they think they can find 12% out there. So 12 goes into 72 every 6 years. So they're going to start off, they're going to pass their first sibling at 41. They're going to pass their second one again, but they get to do this again 2 more times. Okay. So they end up with $320,000. And again, we didn't go from 4 to 40. We just went from 4, adjusted the dial a little bit to 8, adjusted a little bit more to 12. That's a little bit more on the risky side, but that's okay. It's still achievable in some senses. And so that ends up being $320,000, $300,000 more than the first sibling, all because they understood how compound interest worked and decided to put their money in those kind of places. So is that a big or a little difference from 20,000 to 320? It's huge, right? Put a zero on the end there. That's $3 million difference that we've got. So again, those who understand it will earn it, and those who don't will pay it. A little example of what I mean by those who don't will pay it. I bet every single one of us has one of 2 or 3 or 12 of these things in their wallet. Okay. And one of these things, they guarantee 28% interest. And guess what? If you miss a payment, they're benevolent enough to jump that up to about 35% interest. So if we're paying our lifestyle at 28% interest, but we're only earning it at 4%, how are we ever going to win the money game? We're never going to do that. So those who understand it earn it, those who don't pay it. Okay? The next part of this, I hope you all don't get mad at me for talking about taxes, but tax season's right around the corner. Okay? That's in my opinion, in my professional opinion, this is the most important topic that any of us can possibly understand. If you don't take anything else away from this workshop, this is the number one thing to understand. The impact of taxes in the next 20, 30, 40 years on the American public is going to be detrimental if we're not prepared for it. Now, again, I'm not a tinfoil hat wearing person. I don't care about politics. What I do care about is math and logic. We are $37 trillion in debt. Our GDP no longer is paying for the interest. We are now about to lapse that, where we are making less than the interest we owe on that money. Nobody seems to care about that, either side of the aisle. They just keep kicking it down and kicking it down. Well, at some point, guess what's going to happen? They're either going to have to massively cut the budget, which, let's be honest, nobody's really interested in doing that, regardless of what you may think. Or they're going to have to do what? They're going to have to increase taxes. So if I go around to everybody, just like I do with every one of my clients, I'll always ask them, do you think taxes will be higher or lower in the next 25 years? Guess what the answer is 100% of the time? Higher. We all know it. We all have intuition that that's going to happen. We're just waiting for that hammer to come down. So if we're not doing the right things with our money to hedge for the tax problem that we're going to run into, this big freight train that's coming our way in retirement, we are going to have a higher statistic than in 2020 of people retiring in poverty, because that's just the way the world works. So this is the most important part. If you don't take anything else away, it's the tax portion of this and how we're handling our money. Because we can do everything the right way, but if we don't account for taxes, it does not matter. Okay? So we're going to figure out a little bit here on what this means and why it's so important. So we're going to take an account. Okay? We're going to put $1 in this account, and we're going to double it every single year for 20 years. Nowhere in the world can you get 100% return on your money every year, but this is an extreme picture we're painting because it's an extreme problem we have to deal with. So this is just an example so that we can understand the importance and the implications of taxable versus non-taxable when it comes to our savings and what we're doing. So Mr. and Mrs. Millionaire, we sit down, they understand this. If nobody understands the difference between us and what the millionaires are capable of doing, we have one client here who's worth about $180 million. Every time we sit down with him, he brings at least 6 people with him. So he has us as the financial advisors, estate planning side of things. He brings a tax attorney, a tax accountant. He brings another wealth manager. He brings a bunch of people with, and all our goal is every time we sit down with him is how do we save him money in taxes? That is his only concern, is how do we do that? The rest of us, tax season's coming up. Maybe we have a CPA. Even if you're working a W-2 type job, I would suggest that you get a CPA. They will help you save money in ways that you might not have been able to before and adjust some things. But most of us, let's be honest, we use TurboTax, H&R Block, right? There's nothing wrong with them, but we have to understand that those are tax preparers. They are not wealth managers. They're not tax planners. Problem with that I've got with those companies is you click a box, they won't tell you, hey, Christina, you're missing some deductions here based on everything we're looking at. All they will say is, Christina, this box is checked correctly. You can move on. But what we found is that people will, pay the $75 or the free version or whatever just to get it over with. And they're missing maybe 700 to 1500, sometimes thousands of dollars in potential money they should be getting back that we just didn't know was missing. So I'd highly recommend at least a CPA of some sort or an EA, somebody who can actually take a look at things and give you the rubber stamp and say, yep, you've done everything right. This is what it is. Or in most cases, hey, we can actually help you with a little bit different. Now, we are not that. I can't help with that, but please go find a reputable one. So anyway, so we got Mr. and Mrs. Millionaire. They understand how taxes work better than everybody else. And let me let you in on a little secret. The tax code is the same across the board for Warren Buffett as it is for you and me. Okay, it's the same tax code across the board. The difference is they pay these people millions of dollars to understand it better than we ever could. So they come in, they understand the difference between a taxable and non-taxable account. And so they say, yep, we want to start this up. We'll give you $1. It'll double every year for 20 years. So they do that. So it doubles to 2, 4, 8, so on and so forth. And they end up with a little over $1 million. Now, something to note about this, nothing is coming out of this account. There's no taxes, there's no fees, none of that. This is just an example of why it's so important to understand the implication of taxes in our savings. So Mr. and Mrs. Blue Collar, they come in and they sit down with us and we're trying to explain to them, hey, we've got this account, we got this portfolio we can put together for you. We can make it non-taxable off the gate. And they said, you know what? Mom and dad didn't have a guy. I don't think I need a guy. I'll be fine. We're just going to go and do this at the bank because the bank's offering the same thing we are, or you are, the same account. You're going to double our money every year for 20 years. So they decide to do that with missing the tax code completely. So what happens is, and we're going to put them in the 28% tax bracket. So what happens is they put their dollar there and it doubles to $2. Okay, that's called a gain. That gain is then taxed at 28%. So now we have $1.72. So we net out $1.72. Doubles again to $3.44. Tax it, net it out, we're at $2.96. I want everybody in your head to think about what this number will be at the bottom. Okay. When I first saw this, I thought to myself, you know what? 30% tax bracket, will round it up, probably 700,000, but I'm sure this is a trick. Otherwise, it wouldn't be showing me this. I'm going to say $500,000 is what's going to be left. Well, a couple things happened there. One, I just willingly gave the government $500,000 because I thought I had to. The second thing is I was way off. It did start with a 5, but if you double and tax this every single year for 20 years, you end up with $51,000 and change. Big or a little difference between a million, right? Huge. That million is going somewhere. Whether it's going in your pocket or the IRS's pocket is completely up to you and your ability to manage the tax code when it comes to saving money. This is the biggest mistake that people make. Now, most of you are thinking, yeah, but I've got my money in an IRA and it's tax deferred and then all these things. Yes, that is totally true. It's important to understand this and make sure that you know what's what and how that's working. So there's 3 different buckets that we can put money into. There's taxable, tax deferred, and tax free. Okay. On the taxable side, this is our wages, our salaries, commissions, tips. Yes, you can argue with me about tips. Read the tax code that came through. It's not as tax free as you think. Capital gains, royalties, rental income. Christina's going to argue with me about that one too, but you have to get to a certain bracket in a certain place to have that offset itself. Nonetheless, there's a lot of places in our everyday lives that is just taxable no matter what we do. Tax deferred savings are great. I recommend all of us have some of these if we don't, but this would be our 401ks, our IRAs, some mutual funds, 403bs, 457s, some bonds, Social Security. Now, again, you can argue with me, well, but somebody said that Social Security is no longer taxed. Well, that is true up to a certain income bracket. Again, read the tax code because once you get past, I think it's $52,000 in income, Social Security is now the first thing to get taxed and about 85%. So yes, it is non-taxed for the lower income side, but for the rest of us who plan to make more than that in retirement, you're going to run into some tax problems. So don't think that just because we have these tax deferred vehicles that we're out of the woods. In the tax-free bucket, there are 3 places we can save money tax-free, unfortunately. There's municipal bonds, Roth IRAs, and this thing we'll talk about in a minute called the tax-free retirement account. That's it. So in a world of where our taxes are going and how fair it is, we have all of these places in these 2 buckets where the IRS is getting theirs. We only have three places where we can get ours, and most people don't understand how to accurately put these together. Okay. It's my opinion that you need to fund your Roth IRA every single year that you can. There are stipulations to that. I'm happy to answer those questions. Once you've funded a Roth, you should now fund as much as you can into a tax-free retirement account. Once you get to a couple $1 million in municipal bond, then becomes an important thing too. But these are the only three places we can do this, and these are massively important to do. We have a client, and it was a little shocking to me. We sat down with him about 3 weeks ago, right before the end of the year, to talk about how are we going to offset some taxes for that year and gifts and all these different things. The guy had over $15 million, and I'm looking through his account, and I said, I don't know how you did this or where you learned how to do this, but there is not a dime of this money that is going to get taxed in retirement. And he said, I know. I said, how did, like, what, why did you? And he said, well, my grandpa taught me this. And the principle there is, yes, if you put money into a tax-free account, you have to pay taxes on it first. Then it goes in, grows tax deferred, comes out tax-free. He told me this story. He said, imagine that you're a corn farmer, whatever you're doing, you're growing corn, and you come into my shop and I say, hey, Kristina, it's, you're going to buy your normal corn. And you say, yeah, but I'd like to buy a bucket of soy this year as well. Just a 5-gallon bucket. My neighbor's doing well at soy. And I said, Christina's great. There's actually a memo here that says, if you don't want to pay taxes on this today, you don't have to. And she says, well, wonderful. Why would I pay taxes on here if I don't have to? So she doesn't pay taxes, buys the bucket. And on her way out, I stop her at the door. I said, oh, hold on. Because you decided not to pay taxes, your tax deferred bucket, right? We don't pay taxes on money that goes into 401ks and IRAs and all these things. So because you decided not to pay taxes on this today, the IRS says that you have to pay taxes on the entire crop when you bring that back in the fall. If Kristina had known, hey, if you pay this little bit of taxes today, your entire crop is tax free when you go in to bring it in the fall, she probably would have given me the 33 cents in taxes, right? Instead of the hundreds of dollars she would have had to pay in taxes when she brought the crop back in. That's a little nasty thing that we're not taught. So as much money as we can put in, we are in the lowest tax bracket we've been in 50 years right now, whether you like to think so or not. It's allegedly not supposed to sunset anymore, but guarantee you in a decade, enough people, the offices are going to switch and swing and whatever. There's going to be enough people that are going to be able to veto that again. And who knows where we're going to be. But right now, take advantage of the fact that we are in the lowest tax bracket possible that we've ever been in, and start putting as much as you can into this. Okay, it will serve you very well 20, 30 years from now. If tax rates in retirement even go up 5%, that is a detriment to people's income when they're depending on that to live off of. Okay, off my soapbox a little bit. There is this thing that we're going to talk about called the triangle of death and taxes. And then I promise we're done with taxes. Okay. So the triangle of death and taxes, it talks about a couple of things. There are three killers when it comes to retirement money with taxes. The first one is something called an RMD. So for all of us who are saving in our tax deferred buckets, okay, we haven't paid taxes on it now. We're growing it in the IRAs, the 401ks, all these different things, not a Roth, but everything else. It has something, it's got a ticking clock to it that it says, hey, Kristina, you've been paying into this for 50 years and you haven't paid taxes on it. Guess what? It's time to do that. So it's called a required minimum distribution. Right now, that starts at 73 and a half. So if she has $1 million sitting in her IRA at 73 and a half and hasn't taken any money out of it yet, they are going to mandate that she takes out 3.6%. So she has to take out 36,000 of that million, pay the taxes on there and whatever gains there might have been, and then move on. Required to do so. Every year, that divisor table goes up by 10 basis points. So next year, she's got to take 37,000, 38,000, 39,000. But guess what the IRS never promised Kristina? They promised her that she is always going to have to take a little bit more out to pay the taxes, but they never guaranteed her that the tax rate was going to stay the same. So she could be paying her RMDs for 5 years and then the tax rate jumps 10%. Well, guess what? She still has to take out that same RMD, but is now getting 10% less of her money because it has to go to taxes. The second problem is the Social Security Administration. Now, they do this thing every year called COLA, or every couple of years, whatever. It's called the cost of living adjustment. What happens with this is we start Social Security, let's say it's 67. Every year, a couple of years, they give us this cost of living adjustment. It's usually 1 to 2% increase in our Social Security. Now, even if Social Security for you is not going to be taxed at that point, it is still considered income. And the next one is very important, but they all go after gross income, not net after taxes. So if we're getting an increase every year, whether we want to or not, we're having to pay more and more in taxes. So we have to take more out of our RMDs. Guess what's happening to our income? Our income is going up and up and up, whether we want it to or not. Now, a lot of that's still going to get eaten by taxes, but our income from a growth standpoint is still going up. They're still going to look at that and say, hey, Christine, it's been 10 years in retirement. You're making 30% more than you did before, even though it doesn't really feel that way because she's paying more and more of that in taxes. So the last one here, and I'm not going to ask anybody to answer this, but I will just say, think in your head, what is the only thing that every American citizen is required to pay for in retirement? And don't say taxes. I just told you the story about our millionaire who doesn't owe a dime in taxes because of how he did that, right? The one thing that every single person is required to pay for in retirement is Medicare. So when you get to 65, if you're no longer working, you have to go on Medicare and you have to start paying into it. What most people don't understand is that Medicare, how they calculate what you owe and what kind of different Medicare supplements and all these things that you have to pay for. Don't ask me, I don't do that. I just know it's very convoluted. They take your gross annual income and tell you this is now how much you have to pay into Medicare. So if they are giving us more and more income from Social Security and forcing us to take more and more money from our RMDs, and that's all we've done, guess what happens? Whatever income we might have excess left over because of these increases, it's now going to start funneling itself back into Medicare. So we're not actually making any more money in retirement, even though it feels like it. All we're doing is paying back more into Medicare and paying more in taxes. This is where 90% of the population is sitting right now. They've done 401ks and IRAs. They know they've got Social Security coming and that's it. But none of those things at all are protected from taxes. I can't say this enough. This is the biggest problem that most people are going to run into is not hedging this the right way and figuring out a plan to help against this. Now we can do this on one side. We can take this beautiful castle of money that we built, protect it from this triangle of death and taxes. We can build a massive moat. Now, depending on where you are in life will depend on how big or quick we need to build that moat, but it's not too late. There's always different things that we can do to help adjust to say, hey, let's help protect as much of this as we can from this triangle from happening and get as much of it over that moat as we can so that we don't run into this massive problem. Okay, so we're going to get off of taxes. I'm sorry I had to do that, but that is the number one issue I think is what's going to happen to people if they don't figure out what to do with it now. So the other question that we get, okay, I've done all this the right way. How do I protect all of this? Not just from market volatility. We're going to talk about that in a minute. When we get closer to retirement, we should probably have a little less in the market, a little less in that volatility machine, a little bit more in the safe places. And so what we do is we say, okay, well, how do we protect this? And I'm not talking about just from volatility. I am talking about from a little bit from market loss. But what most people don't realize, about 75 to 80% of all bankruptcies happen because of medical emergencies that people could not financially recover from. Out of that statistic, about 95% of them had adequate health insurance. I don't know the last time any of you were in the hospital. My wife was in about 2 years ago, had to have some back surgeries done. I was amazed when I got the bill and they were charging me $400 for a Tylenol pill. It kind of blew my mind a little bit. And even though I had insurance and everything was allegedly covered, I still had a $16,000 medical bill I had to pay for after the fact. And most people, when you run into a detrimental cancer situation, or you have a heart attack or a stroke, something, those kind of things can wipe out longevity. They can wipe out our savings. They can wipe out everything. Statistics are if you have some kind of medical emergency of that extent, you are now completely insolvent in 2 years. It takes 24 months to wipe out absolutely everything if something like that were to happen. So before we get into that side, we are going to talk about the volatility side for a second. Okay. So most people have this financial teeter-totter in their heads. They think, okay, on one side we've got risk, on the other side we've got safety. On the risky side, we've got our stocks, our bonds, mutual funds, commodities, cryptocurrency, all these things that are relatively volatile. On the safety side, we've our CDs, our money market accounts. We maybe put some money in the mattress or the gun safe or something. And we try to balance this out. We say, well, we got to have some here. We're going to have some here. And hopefully that's enough. If this one goes down, that this one's safe enough. The problem is on the risky side, why do we put money over there? Right? There's no ceiling. We can earn a great amount of money on the risky side. But we can also lose it all pretty quick too. I don't know if anybody who's in their working years in 2001, 2008, 2016, 2020, and just you kind of get this cycle going on. And if you're not protected the right way and doing all these things, you can lose a lot of money pretty much overnight. On the safety side, we put money there because there's no risk. The problem is that we can grow very little on that side as well. So we do this thing where we say, well, I got to have some here, I got to have some here, and I would agree. You need a well-rounded portfolio. But there is something in the middle that most people really don't know. Nope. Yeah, I just muted myself. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, you're back now. We lost you for a little
Okay.
bit.
Okay. So an indexed account kind of sits right in the middle of that. All right. So an indexed account, if this happens to be the right situation for your portfolio, what this does is we take our indexed account, it's just a savings bucket we put money into, and we're going to compare it real quick to the market. Okay. So we're going to put $100,000 in the S&P, so an indexed fund, not to be confused with an indexed account. Indexed fund would be the S&P, the NASDAQ, the Dow. There's all these different indices we can choose from. We like the S&P the best. So we put 100,000 in the S&P, 100,000 in the indexed account. What happens is, let's say the first year the S&P goes down, 5%. An indexed account has a guaranteed floor of zero, which means you put your money in here. If the market's down that given year, we just sit on the sidelines. We don't get any losses for that. So the first year we just get a zero, the market's down 5%. Second year, market's down 4%. Again, they just come and give us a zero. This is not very attractive right now. However, if you have all of your money in a very volatile place and the market goes down, you lose a lot of sleep. If you have all your money in a place where there's no interest that can be gained, the market goes way up, you'll lose a lot of sleep. This is kind of that sweet spot in the middle. Okay, so the next year, let's say the S&P is up 5%. Well, they're going to come and credit our account 5%. These are based on annual increments depending on when we started this account. So it could be October to October, March to March, July to July. Whatever that annual increment is of your calendar year is now what we base on the index fund. So the S&P goes up 5%, we go up 5% with it, and then we lock it in for the next year. So the following year, the market goes down 3%. We've already locked that in. Last year's interest is now next year's starting principal because they're based on annual events. So that year, we would just get a zero. Following year, let's say the market comes roaring back. We go up 15%. Okay, that tends to happen from time to time as we've got these lows and then we bounce way up. In order for this not to be some too good to be true Bernie Madoff type thing, they put a ceiling on here. Okay, if there's going to be a floor, there's got to be a ceiling. The ceiling has hovered around 10 to 12% for as long as I can remember, sometimes a little lower, sometimes a little higher, but on average, we're between 10 and 12%. We're going to say 10% for this example. So if the market goes up 15% that year, they'll come and credit our account 10. So in this 5-year period of time, this is from 2012 to 2018, this is what the S&P would have done. We would have been at negative 7.8%. Okay, now we know that the market has gone way up since then, which is fine. But in this particular account, we would have had $92,000 sitting there. On the other side, we wouldn't have lost anything. We only would have gone up when it went up. So we went up 7 one year, 10 one year. So we'd be up 17,000 in that account. Again, let me stress this. This is not a place that we put all of our money. This is a place that we look at diligently, understand how this works. And this is a great place to put money we maybe can't afford to lose or money that we've already paid taxes on. Okay. One of the things that always blows my mind is people that already paid money in taxes on an account and then they put it somewhere they can also lose it. I'm never one that's going to pay taxes and then potentially lose that money. That doesn't make sense to me. So this has a place for everybody, and it's important to understand that. So just a little example from 2000 to 2024. I will update this because now we're in 2026. I couldn't before because we were still in 2025. But to 2024, what would have happened if we had that same 100,000 in there and just the S&P? At the end of 2024, we'd have been sitting a little under $600,000. So great time, right? You just sat there, let it ride, didn't touch it at all. Warren Buffett gives a great speech about that. He says, look, just put it somewhere. If you can stomach the dips and just leave it, the market will always end up on top. Okay. If we had done the same thing in an indexed account with a 10% cap, we would have not had to lose sleep in the 2000s. 2007 and 8, when that crash happened, again, we would have just gotten a zero. We would have just keep riding it up and sideways, up and sideways. We call this a green line product. I call it the escalator for some of my clients. But at the end of the year, in 2024, we would have been sitting at 543,000 and change. Okay. I show this example to teach everybody that an indexed account is a great tool for money we can't afford to lose, but it is not a great tool to put all of our money in that basket. There is going to be plenty of years where the market is going to beat that. There's going to be some years where it doesn't. But what is important to understand is, let's say this was 25 and we don't know what's going to happen this year in 26, and the market comes down 20%, right? That's happened over the years. The indexed account's staying right where it's at, and we don't have to rebound any of that. We just start compounding again once it restarts. So again, this is a great tool to have in our full portfolio for those rainy day protection funds for some money we don't want to lose. It's a little bit more aggressive than like a CD at the bank, right? A little less stringent as well. So there's a time and a place for this, especially when we're growing that kind of money to put it there. So indexed account is a very important thing for everybody to look into and potentially have as a part of your savings plan. Now, all that being said, we can build the perfect foundation, the absolute perfect foundation. How am I doing on time, Kristina? Do I need to get moving? Okay.
Yeah, we got about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Let's like to have a little bit of time for questions.
Okay. So we can build this perfect foundation, right? We can do everything right. But then what happens is, so we've got our income here, we've got our expenses at the bottom. Hopefully our expenses are less than our income. And hopefully we're making more and more of that over the years. But what happens is a negative life event takes place. If I went around to all of you and asked you if this has happened to you or somebody you know, I bet everybody would have a story. But a negative life event takes place. For some reason, something happens to us medically that our income stops. We get cancer, we have a heart attack, we're in a major car accident, something happens. And guess what? If we're not structured the right way, our expenses skyrocket. This is where debt incurs because nobody cares that you lost your job. You still have all of these bills coming in. If you call your mortgage company and say, hey, I have cancer, I can't work for the next 8 months, guess what they're going to say? Sorry about your problems. The mortgage is still due on the first of the month, right? So this is where negative life events and this is where debt and bankruptcy happen. So there's something, probably the most important part of your foundation, your portfolio is this thing that we call living benefits. Okay. This is not a fun conversation because none of us think this is going to happen to us, but it's important for everybody to learn and understand and have this as a protection piece. So living benefits is a life insurance policy. That life insurance policy, of course, like every other death benefit policy we've heard of, permanent term, doesn't matter. Let's say that we have $1 million policy. So that's our financial reserve. What living benefits does is if we have a terminal illness, they will let us access up to 100% of this if we have 24 months or less to live. So something happens, 24 months or less, I can file a claim. They will give me up to $1 million out of there. No issues, no questions asked after they've done their due diligence. A couple of things about this. It is life insurance. So anything that you receive from that is tax-free. We can use it for whatever we want, and you never have to pay it back. It's your own death benefit. They're accelerating early. The second part of this is if we get a critical illness or injury. This is far more likely to happen to most of us than we're just going to die early. Okay, so this would be heart attack, cancer, stroke, paralysis, a coma, all sorts of different major medical things. They will let us access up to 75% of this. So if you had that $1 million, hey, we're going to file the claim. If they approve it, they write us a check for up to $750,000, no questions asked. Last one is chronic illness. This is slowly replacing, it's like a long-term care adjacent, if you will. It's 2%. I need to change this too because they just upped it to 4% a month for up to 60 months. If we can't do 2 of the 6 daily living, we need nursing care, all of these different things. We can tap into this death benefit early to help this. And of course, the last one, if we just pass away, it's going to pay out like it normally would, normal death only. Okay. I'm going to give a quick example here. I've got a little bit more of slides, but we'll stop here. This is probably good enough. Of the best way that I've ever seen a tax-free indexed account work. Okay, so we call this the $1 Million Baby Plan. This is my daughter Riley, so I call it the $1 Million Riley Plan. Okay, we started stashing away into this thing, $200 a month for her when she was born. She's 6 now. All right. What's going to happen is when she gets to college time, she'll have about $88,000 sitting in there that she can access completely tax-free and it's not visible by FAFSA. So if she goes to get student loans or any of these other things, they don't look at this as some kind of thing she has to deplete before she can do that. Scholarships, grants, all of that, this is all hidden from there. If she doesn't do that and she just keeps on doing this $200 a month, when she's in her early 30s, she'll have $115,000 in there conservatively that she can then tap into for a down payment on a home or to help pay for her wedding. And if she just keeps doing that $200 a month because she's got such a long time of compounding, at 65, conservatively, she'll have $1.5 million of completely tax-free money she can use for whatever she wants. IRS can't touch it. So we did this for her. I know that this works because the first time I learned about this, I turned to my dad and I said, how come I don't have one of these? He said, son, I didn't know this existed. If I had, I definitely would have done this for you, right? I think all of us would say, yeah, I wish my parents would have done that. So for a small amount of money over a long period of time, compounded and put in the right tax-free place, We've got liquidity, we've got access to it. There's no taxes for it whatsoever. We earn a decent interest rate. There are some great things out there that we can utilize for everything in our lives. So I'm going to stop this here. We're not going to get into the rest of this. We can maybe do a 2.0 down the road if you want to, Kristina. We'll kind of go from there. Um, so at the moment, I think we can open it up for some Q&A if you guys have any. I appreciate your time and listening in here. And sorry, I got a little bit distracted with the tax side, but again, that's one of the more important things that we need to understand.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm bummed we didn't get it to the last part, but we'll have you back.
Yep.
Because there's just huge benefits all the way around. And there's so many things that I learned from you, and some of it just seems basic, like, yeah, I know about that. But but you don't, like, you're not, you might know about it, but you're not utilizing the benefits, or you're paying more than you should be on things. And that's where the biggest step came in for me, was that, just realizing the compound interest I was paying out. So the quickest amount of money we saved was, getting those credit cards under control right away. And then we found money we didn't have to then put towards those credit cards, so that we're paying those down so quick. So in 3 years, we paid over $66,000 in credit card debt down. Yeah, I mean, it just, that compound interest works either way, like you were saying. And yeah, there's just so many other things that are so important, like the life insurance. I wish I would have had that. I was diagnosed with cancer at 24, and we didn't have the money for that kind of help or medical stuff, or anything like that. We had good insurance, but we still were paying that, all of that off and down. And had we been able to access some of that money for my care, it just would have made the stress levels so much lower. So for me, I just was able to shift mindset on a lot of these things and make some big gains really quickly. And so I hope that other people on here can realize just those little tweaks, and also reach out to Sheldon if you have any questions. But do we have any questions? Does anybody have any questions? I know we went through a lot in a very small amount of time. Go ahead and unmute yourself to ask if you'd like, or throw it in the chat.
Okay, let's see. Chris asked, oh no, Catherine, was the app. So that the app that I use, it's called Rocket Money. There's a couple of different ones out there. That one is just the best one that I've found because you can compile everything into it. It'll give you a data set of what you're spending money on and where you've got all these outstanding things and hidden fees and all this stuff. You can go in there and cancel stuff. It'll do it for you. If it says, hey, you've got this subscription, you say, I don't remember that, cancel it. It'll do it for you. So it's called Rocket Money. No, it's overwhelming. But if you guys have any
I know.
questions that you can think of, let us know after the fact. Email Kristina. She'll reach out. We'll be happy to get to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much for everyone coming. And I hope you were able to take away something that you can use right away. But we are here. Reach out to me and I'll get you in touch with Sheldon if you have questions, especially about, some of those tax-free accounts and anything else. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.